I do.
We have a whopping 35 people on this call.
Sweet.
Which is fantastic. I'm excited that you all are here. I'm going to get started. I'm going to talk slowly just in case we have other people who are joining in. I just want to say good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual presentation of the ImpACT Leadership Class of 2020 Group Projects. I'd like to thank all of the national board members who are here, as well as chapter and council leaders here who are here to support their colleagues, chapter and council members, and friends. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we will save questions until after each group has had the opportunity to present. If you have a question before the end, feel free to type it in the chat. If you're like me and you forget from minute to minute, if you put it in the chat, we can come back to it. So I'm going to turn this over to Jim Barr, Director of Transportation and Parking at the University of Vermont. Jim is a board member and he's the chair of the Professional Development Committee. He's been involved with ImpACT since the very beginning and is going to tell us a little bit more about the program.
Sure. Great. Can you go to slide 3? Thank you.
Let's see, that was that's the agenda. Okay.
There. Is that slide 3?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to echo the welcome that Elizabeth just shared. It's great to see everybody, and I'd like to refresh us all on the purpose and the goals of ACT, the ACT Leadership Program, ImpACT Leadership Program. So ImpACT is a leadership development program for early to mid-career TDM professionals. The 3-day retreat that we host each year brings together a cross-section of TDM professionals from around the country representing public and private organizations. The program offers participants in-depth learning opportunities that will provide a strong foundation for individual growth, building a network of peers for continuous support, and prepare participants for leadership in their professions and for ACT. We have several goals. I'll try to quickly summarize some of them. As I mentioned, I might have mentioned, it's a 3-day in-residence program that we have in the past held at Disney. They spend the 3 days learning from professional trainers, TDM experts, and ACT leaders. They complete an online leadership assessment to identify ways to increase effectiveness, which is usually woven into the actual instruction there during those 3 days. We have 8 areas that we kind of focus on, focusing on the customer experience, focusing on how to create and motivate work environment, be introduced to emotional intelligence, improve communication skills for leading others, learn how to coach others to maximize performance, learning strategies for leading others through change, strengthening understanding of TDM, learning about ACT and how to achieve personal and professional growth through the organization. And another big goal is to return home back to wherever they came from to take on new tasks and lead with confidence. This program benefits ACT in many ways, as well as the TDM profession. The continued development of strong leaders with the TDM profession is essential to achieving the goals of our association and improving the quality of life of the individuals, the livability of communities, and the economic growth of business. The ImpACT Leadership Program recognizes and develops practitioners who have shown an initial commitment to professional service at the start of their career in TDM. The program provides selected candidates with leadership training and ongoing mentorship by identifying needs for volunteer service within ACT, I should say, that match with each participant's leadership goals. It's the program's goal that the leadership training and experience provided shall inspire and continued service. Let's see, the class really clicked this year. I will say that. They formed bonds and made this year's experience particularly enjoyable and successful. It's unfortunate this year that it was vastly different than what we had planned for it to be. It goes without saying that, you know, we wanted to have everybody in place and at an in-person August conference, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So although the groups were supposed to meet and do it in person, they did a fantastic job, I think, having previewed the presentations. So without further ado, you can go to slide 4, please. This is the class. I don't know how big you guys can see. This is the class of 2020, ImpACT Leadership.
Congratulations, everybody.
Sweet.
Now you have to do we've just congratulated you and you still have the hard part.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. All right.
So, the first one up.
Okay, so we will get started. Counterintuitively, we're going to start with group 5 because there's a scheduling conflict with one of those participants. So I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Oops. Sorry, technical difficulties, wrong button. Okay, so our first group up is Sylvia Crum, who is the program manager with commute options at Innovate Memphis. Tammy Quinn, the program manager for rideshare and event services with Capital Metro. And Johan Weber, who is a senior program specialist with Urban Trans North America. So you guys want to go ahead and pull up your presentation? Take it away.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think that we didn't talk about who would share this. Tammy, did you want to share it, or I have it up?
It doesn't matter. I guess I thought they were doing it. So yeah, I can.
I think I can do it right here.
Okay, go ahead.
Elizabeth, do I have, oh, looks like I've got permission.
Yep.
Okay, and I'm gonna say slideshow from the start.
Cool. Okay, great.
Are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Yep, perfect.
My first slide, okay. Well, thank you so much for having us, and I appreciate letting us switch the schedule around so we could go first. And I just wanted to say greetings, but also Jim, I want to call for my rain check in-person meeting, just recognizing that it was a strange year. So we were a class that really connected with each other. I'm so grateful for my participation this year in this program and having all these new colleagues and having deeper relationships with ACT board members and staff as well. But I definitely want to get to do this meeting, at least in some form, maybe with a cocktail in person when we're able. I look forward to that. Well, I really enjoyed being with this group, and Elizabeth has told you who we are, but Tammy, Johan, and I had a good time working together. Let's see, I think Elizabeth may have said, but I'm in Memphis with the Commute Options Program at Innovate Memphis. Tammy is in Austin, Texas, and Johan is in Atlanta. And so we were able to, thanks to being so easy to work with Zoom, work together on this project. Sorry, I made it go away. Okay, it doesn't want to let me see my notes and talk to you with my slideshow at the same time. So I'm going to make you look at this next slide, and then I'm going to read my notes here. So you're going to have to look at my slide from a funny view here. So I'll just introduce this project that we did, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to tell you more about how we did it. So I apologize. Let me click out, and I'm going to read this to you. Despite the central place for transit in TDM work, not all transit agencies are active in TDM or maintain the strongest partnerships with their local TMAs or TDM organizations. Yet the future of both transit and TDM hinge on maximizing our partnerships with each other to bring more resources and ridership. We especially saw this in 2020 as transit is poorly positioned in a pandemic and even maybe our post-pandemic future, where if we don't work with TDM, it threatens the future of what transit can do for increasing ridership. So way back, you might remember, before the pandemic, we conducted a survey of TMAs and did follow-up interviews with transit agencies, and this just as COVID was taking off in the United States. We still believe that the recommendations that we're going to share with you today are pertinent. My colleagues will speak on the need for TDM organizations to build more active, higher level partnerships with their transit agencies. And also we have recommendations for how ACT can support this collaboration to navigate the challenges ahead. So now I'll let you see the slideshow in a regular way, and I'm going to turn it over to Tammy. Tammy, do you want it on this slide or shall I move forward?
I think this part is actually mine, right, Sylvia?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got us out of order.
No, that's all right.
Go ahead.
I'm the end.
I'm sorry, Tammy. Go ahead, Johan. I meant Johan. Do you want this slide or shall I move forward?
No, this is fine. So thanks, Sylvia. That's a good setup as she sort of provided. We did conduct this survey pretty early. We came out of Orlando very motivated. We decided we'd hit the ground running and try to gather some data, and then that could convert into a program of action. Unfortunately, we got the data, started to understand a little bit of what it looked like about exactly when we all sort of stopped riding buses and trains for quite a while. So we distributed the survey via the TMA Council list, the ACT Council list, as well as to all the TMA contacts that had been identified in the 2019 ACT TMA survey, which was like 180 TMAs. So we had a pretty good sample to work with. We chose TMAs as our sort of TDM unit of analysis because we knew that they'd give us a sufficient quantity of responses, or at least a somewhat interesting one. And we figured there were also a similarly standardized organization. Obviously TMAs and TMOs aren't necessarily super consistent, but they're more consistent than many other things we could work with. And we sent it out. We got 65 unique responses, about 48 actual unique completed organizations presented in it. So that's the results that you see. And the core research question was really just, how is the relationship between TDM organizations and their local transit agency? So the first thing we want to know was, what types of relationship does the TMA or TMO actually have with their respective primary transit agency? And you see that the sort of results broken out here. The biggest thing was there were substantial frequencies of formal roles. So transit agencies providing some sort of direct funding or contributing formally to the TDM direction, such as coordinating committee or a board seat, or partnering formally in some sort of services. So that was kind of interesting in and of itself, as somebody who works in a TMA that does not have any formal role with our transit agency. But there were some informal ones captured here, and generally the major takeaway here just was there's an interesting diversity in the nature and type of relationships between TDM organizations, in this case TMAs and TMOs, and transit agencies. So that's our starting point. Went too far there. Sorry.
You tell me what you want to see.
Oh yeah, if you'll go back.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Did I go? No, sorry, go. Yeah, that was the right one.
This one here?
Yeah, so the next then question was, we asked people, we gave them the opportunity to identify a primary transit agency in their area, as well as potentially a secondary one. So obviously many organizations, many metros will have more than one transit agency active in the area. We're interested in how they would sort of assess the relationships with those transit agencies across a couple different dimensions, well, 5 in particular. So we asked them about their access to agency leadership, the transit agency's understanding of TDM as a practice, how frequently they coordinated on TDM work, how frequently they coordinated on transit activities, such as service operations, planning, and then the overall quality of coordination with that agency. So if we go to the next one. The biggest things, obviously, a few bar charts here, but the big thing that we found is that overall, there was pretty good access to transit agency leadership, which is good news. So we thought originally maybe one of the problems is that, TDM isn't sort of high enough in the food chain. But in fact, that does seem to be one of the areas that overall was rated more highly. But on the flip side, and also that there was positively some decent perception about the understanding of TDM by transit agencies. Certainly still clear evidence that there was an opportunity to improve that, but it was rated sort of overall the second highest in terms of their mixture of high and very high. On the other hand, the frequency and overall quality of coordination was much more mixed, or in fact, pretty lowly rated. And this was really probably the most common response, a mixed relationship between the TDM organization and the transit agencies, especially considering that we saw 37% reported that an agency provided direct funding for TDM. We thought it was really interesting. We wouldn't have frankly expected 50% to have a mixed rating of the quality of their coordination with that agency. So what this sort of suggests is, having whatever formal relationships, or maybe, there not being a formal one, there's still a lot of room for improvement in terms of the relationships between these entities, which was sort of our core driving research question here. But the things that we noted as maybe particular opportunities or areas to explore further, the overall lowest rated thing was on the frequency of coordination on the transit side. So service operations planning, despite the fact that TMAs may in many cases gather more detailed and frequent local information than their partners. This was the lowest rated thing. So we flagged that as a really interesting area for some potential opportunity and improvement. So we'll go on to the next one. And I'm going to pass this off here to Tammy, who's going to talk a little bit about what we've sort of taken away from this in an updated context.
Okay, so we all, or the three of us, discussed how much different this survey might have been if we had done it post COVID instead of pre-COVID. But we did find that even though if we had redid the survey, it might not come out a whole lot different. But our takeaway was that because of COVID, we have seen some holes in what we need to do. And one of the biggest thing is with transit agencies, transit agencies need to be more supportive of TDMs, given complete access to their services, and helping TDMs be able to push their services out to the community. And then with TDM organizations, they should continue to support their partners and work with them to manage the volumes. And especially now, there's going to be different rules, different ways we play the game, different ways we ride. And so TDM can be very helpful in helping transit agencies understand what the public wants and helping the public and organizations be able to trust riding transit again. But without ACT, we know that we have to have a strong backing, especially in legislation, to support both transit and TDM. So then we continue to ask ACT be a loud voice, saying that transit can be and is cleaner than your office or grocery store. There's a very interesting article that the National Geographic did on showing the difference of air quality in public transit as opposed to a classroom and a office setting. So I encourage everybody to go read that article. And in closing, I really loved working with this group. I think we came up with some ideas of how we can continue to help and be leaders with ACT. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Any questions?
Let's hold off on questions till the end. Oh, I know you guys might have to leave early, so if anyone has something, feel free to put stuff in the chat as well. Okay, cool. So let's move on to group number 1, which is Brittany Barrett, the Assistant Director of Transportation at Emory University, Marie-France Lauren, the Chief Development Officer with NetLift, and David Zick, the Customer Service Manager at We Drive You. All right, take it away.
Yeah, I think Marie-France was gonna start us off.
Yeah, she is. She's got the screen up there. Marie-France, are you on mute?
I was looking to find my my screen. Thank you. Sorry about that. So thank you everyone for attending that presentation today. I really want to start by saying thank you to ACT for putting that group together, and thank everyone that took part of the group, because I don't know how it was before. I like to think that we were a special group, but I think that we all got really great connection together, and thank you so much for making that happen. So our project was not supposed to be this one, but due to something called COVID that changed the entire reality of everyone, we had to realign. We were trying to focus on something that could bring opportunities to ACT to kind of showcase what TDM is and how we can increase TDM place into the world in general. We looked at everything that ACT is doing. So ACT is doing a lot of stuff with providers, with public transit authorities, TMAs, TMOs, name it. There's a lot of them. And one of the things that we were trying to think of is, what are the new opportunities? What are the different groups that ACT could maybe approach and see with them how we can implement TDM, and see on the long vision how we can increase that and really bring more people, more membership to ACT. So our program, our project that we did was with school districts. So we worked, thanks Elizabeth for that, but we got in touch with Arlington School District, and we worked with them to see how we can support them on the back to school after COVID. They put a lot of effort into the program for the students and how they're going to bring students back to the school, but nothing was really done. And when we talked to Kristen there, she was telling us that there's a little bit of a gap between what they can and what they know how to do it for the employees and the teachers. So that's really what we worked on. So we start by putting all the information that we got. So basically Arlington School District did the survey with their employees to see what kind of solution they were looking for to get back to the school and the workplace. We put all the information on a map just to give a little bit of a visual and really easy to understand visual where you can see where people are coming from. And then from there, we pushed the analysis on the data that we got and the data that was available out there to see what are the different options that they have. David?
Thanks, Marie. So now that we understand where the school district staff live and work, we wanted to turn our attention to their commute patterns to understand how to tailor the TDM recommendations. If you can go to the next slide. And so as you can see here, I know the text is a little bit small on the x-axis, but looking at the blue bar graphs, you'll notice that most of the school district staff still uses their personal vehicles about 80% of the time, which of course provides a clear reason to focus on alternative modes of transportation. But that said, if you look at the orange bars, you'll notice that about 1 out of every 3 people will use on occasion other modes of transportation, which does indicate a willingness to switch from SOVs. And we can see here, if you look at, and stay on that previous slide, please. You'll see a few instances of where folks will switch modes, such as with carpools, rideshare, biking, and walking. Of course, during COVID, encouraging other mode adoption will be limited based on the safety guidelines we've seen from the public health community, and of course, from individual comfort levels. What we have seen, I'm sure you've all read in the press, is as people have been sheltering in place, quite a bit of popularity with biking and walking, as people are looking to get outdoors and to get a break from being in their homes all the time. And so of these other modes that we're seeing people are using on occasion, biking and walking have, I think, the most opportunity to translate that popularity during COVID as recreational hobbies into commuting as folks return to their school sites. And so what we'll do over the next couple of slides, if you turn the page, is focus in on biking and walking interests as far as how we can increase adoption with those modes. And so just for context, about half the school staff, just over 600 folks, have signed up for commuter benefits. About 1 out of every 5, just under that 17% signed up for the biking commuter benefits. And as we look at the map here on the right, you'll see the red dots indicate the biking infrastructure as far as trails and so forth. And so a majority, I'd say about 2/3 of folks have pretty convenient access within a short distance of their residence to take advantage of bike infrastructure. However, we have noticed in a couple of examples, there are exceptions where there is a pretty good infrastructure for biking, but there is actually less interest per capita. And you look at the northern parts, the northwestern parts of the county, for example, in the neighborhoods of Williamsburg, Yorktown, Rock Spring, again, there is that less interest despite the infrastructure and plan. So that indicates to us there's a demand disconnect, which provides that opportunity to communicate the bike benefits more vocally to staff in that portion of the county. It's also worth noting here, you'll see the red and yellow icons scattered throughout the map. That is the Capital Bike Share, the local bike share program in the region. And again, in the northern part of the county, it's pretty clear that there's a lack of those bike share stations. So we do recommend encouraging collaboration with that program to add more stations to increase the infrastructure for that community. The other thing I'll say too is in the western portion, there are about 4 schools you'll notice right on the county line in the Glen Caron neighborhood. And it's clear that there is some bike infrastructure as far as trails, but there also isn't any access to Capital Bike Share. So we recommend adding more stations as well to connect to that green trail, the 4-mile run trail, to provide greater connectivity between Glen Caron and the adjacent areas. And then the next slide, we'll look at the walking interest. And even more so than biking, 1 out of every 4 folks that did sign up for bike benefits chose walking. And it's pretty clear, if you look at the green lines indicating sidewalk infrastructure, most residents have sidewalks on their block. So that is a great baseline to increase adoption. Of course, you will get some detractors as far as the distance, traffic, weather, health issues, etc. But there are a couple of ideas we had to increase adoption even further. We noticed that there is, I believe, the TMA there in the county called Arlington Transportation Partners, who has a guaranteed ride home program, but it was unclear in the literature to the staff themselves how well that's promoted. So an opportunity to let folks know that they do have access to guaranteed ride homes a few times each year in the event that they do have concerns about returning home in the evening if it gets dark or it rains or whatever the case may be. And the second thing too that we didn't come across, which is something to look at, is whether it's across the district or on a site-specific basis, depending on parking challenges, looking at parking cash out as a program could also be another way to incentivize more walking. And so aside from biking and walking, as we turn to the next slide, Brittany's going to cover some of the other TDM options that we explored.
Thank you, David. So in addition to the biking and the walking, based on the survey results and looking at the infrastructure, it seemed to us that Arlington Public Schools could focus on carpooling. It looks like there are some matching, there's a form where you can get matched through the TMA, Arlington Transportation Partners. And then public transit, we recommended working with the TMA, working with the transit agency, which goes back to the first presentation Group 5 did today, about assisting the employees at the school with the timing and the service levels to make it convenient enough for them to be able to use public transit to access the schools. You can go to the next slide. So we have some conclusions here specifically for the school district that we looked at, but like Marie-France spoke about, we think that this is a project that could be duplicated, that other school districts could use it. So we have some kind of general outcomes as well. So we thought for the school district, probably need an increase in communication about the custom commute plan function, that's available for people so that they don't have to feel overwhelmed with trying to find their best option, that, there's a TMA there that someone can assist them with that. To make sure that they put any of the benefits for using a commute alternative in the annual benefits enrollment package. That's when people are thinking about making changes. for their health, and you know, considering a commute alternative could be done at that exact same time. And then of course in all new hire packets that they get information about the commute alternatives that are available. And you know, focusing on bikes, it looked like the greatest number of potential users based on the infrastructure available and the people that were near it was bikes. So some increases to infrastructure that David talked about in terms of like adding some paths and racks, and then increasing the capital bike share locations in some areas that seem like they would use it if they had access to it. In general, we think some of the outcomes that this is a replicable project that other schools can do if they're doing surveys, overlaying their data with the resources that are available to find out where there's a demand disconnect, and then focusing on that for their outreach. Increasing visibility and outreach for TDM in this K through 12 sector. We don't really have any members of ACT in this group, and we are shaping the next generation of employees. So if we can get the employees of these school districts to model this behavior, then their students might eventually take that on as well. So I think it could have, you know, impact, lasting impact into the future. And I think that is all we have.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Great. Okay, so while we get ready for the next group, we have Madeline Feig of Customer Service Manager at Loom, Melissa Foley, Senior Account Manager at Commute with Enterprise, and Katie Justice, Director of Downtown Mobility Collaborative with Valley Regional Transit. This might be a topic, or a project rather, that is familiar to many of you, and I will let them explain more.
Awesome, thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Madeline Feig with Loom, as Elizabeth mentioned. I'm really excited to see you all. It's nice to see some familiar faces. Some of you might remember from back in February that our original ImpACT project proposal was a podcast. Katie, do you want to go on to the next slide, actually? Thank you. So we, as we all know, shortly after we left Orlando back in February, things changed pretty drastically for everyone. Because of that, we decided to pivot our project to kind of adapt to this changing environment and create something a bit more relevant to the issues that ACT members were facing at that time and continue to face now. Something that we kept hearing in our circles was kind of a desire to hear what decisions and plans other organizations and employers and agencies were making, and kind of a need for an avenue to help facilitate that kind of information sharing. So building off of that need, our ImpACT group decided to help facilitate TDM virtual discussions for ACT members each Friday for 10 weeks. Each of those discussions was focused on a different topic related to TDM, transportation programming during COVID and beyond. These discussions, which I think a lot of you were able to be a part of, which is great, helped allow ACT members to collaborate, share best practices, some of the struggles that we were dealing with, and some ideas that folks were having within the TDM sphere. We'll get more into metrics in just a moment, but overall these were really successful discussions. Some great information was able to be shared, and now they've been adopted as more of an ongoing program for ACT members as well. All right, on to the next one. I'll hand it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Madeline. So every week for the 10 weeks, we would come up with ideas that we thought would have an impact on ACT members, and we'd also take ideas from ACT members to utilize for each meeting. So the discussion topics for the 10 weeks, as you can see here, was anything from how the TDM community was responding to COVID, to changing commute behavior. We had some your own choose your topics, bike, walk, scoot. So it was really just ways for the team and ACT members to come together and really collaborate during this time when we were all struggling with TDM. Next slide, Katie. So our attendance metrics. So our first call, Casey was very excited. We had 245 people register for the call, and we could only have 100 people on the call. So there was people saying they couldn't get on. By week 2, Casey had upped it, and so we were able to have everybody on there. And as you can see, each week we had over 100 ACT members from across the country participating in these calls because they really wanted to hear what others were doing and how we could work together during this time. Next slide, Katie. Here are some pictures from our virtual discussions. It was great to be able to see everybody every week and talk to some members across the country that, you know, we might not have been familiar with, but now we could hear what was going on that side compared to what might be going on the West Coast over here with us, so that we could all really work together and get the message out about TDM. And now I'm going to hand it over to Katie.
Thank you. So lastly, we did these calls. They had really great attendance. They seemed to be very impactful. But then we started reaching out as we were putting this together, this presentation, to some ACT members to really gather some feedback on, were they useful? Did people like to see them? And so I'm going to share just a couple quotes with you. Keep it quick. I know we're only supposed to talk for 5 minutes. So one is, the weekly ACT virtual calls were a lifeline to other agencies experiencing the obstacles we were. We not only gleaned information of what each of us were experiencing, but brainstormed how to be proactive about our messaging and fleet operations. Without the information from the virtual calls, we wouldn't have had a consistent, reliable message to area commuters. And then another one, the ACT virtual discussions were critical in helping the industry respond to the COVID-19 crisis. It was out of these discussions that a team was formed to prepare a guide inclusive of CDC and OSHA recommendations, as well as subject matter experts for returning to work using carpools, public transportation, and shuttle. The resource also addressed parking and telework. Only ACT would deliver such a comprehensive and relied upon resource. So not only did we have really high attendance numbers, people really enjoyed and took a lot it was very impactful in responding to something that was unprecedented, that there were no experts on, right? We were all trying to figure out together, and this was a way for us to do that. And they were so popular that ACT has now brought back the virtual discussions as a staple part of services that they offer to their members, and those have started back up. And with that, thank you. And yeah, we'll be here at the end for any questions.
Fabulous, thanks. All right, up next we have Kelly Hostetler-Koster, Corporate Affairs and Marketing Manager for Loom, and Lloyd Nadal, Program Services Division Manager at Solano Transportation Authority. And they're all set. Take it away, guys.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. This is Kelly. I take it you can all see my screen. Yes. Okay. Excellent. So just like everyone else here today, you heard it from them. It happened to us too. COVID changed everything. Lloyd and I, first of all, we had a third partner. She left TDM, sadly. So then it became the dream team was just two, just Lloyd and I. And then COVID hit. And we had planned a project, if you remember, that was all based around conferences, and people needed to be there in person. So as everyone can imagine, that was totally out the window. And we had to regroup and rethink what our project should be. So ultimately, what Lloyd and I ended up doing was kind of book report style. We did some in-depth interviews with a few different groups of TDM professionals. We did a university interview with university hospitals and just universities to understand how they were responding to the pandemic and how that was impacting their TDM efforts. And then we also did an interview with Kendall Square Alliance in Cambridge, where they're talking about how they're working with employers and working with the MBTA in Boston to flatten the peak, as they call it, which is, you know, obviously a play off of flattening the curve, but here they're trying to flatten the peak commute times. So I'll tell you just quickly a bit about our university interview, and then I'll hand it over to Lloyd, my awesome, amazing partner, who will talk about the Kendall Square Flattening the Peak strategy. And we'll go really quick because we have these 5 minutes. So these will just be some quick highlights, and at the end, we'll link you to the full report so you can dive into more detail. So first of all, thank you to these universities who we spoke to. There they are at the bottom. They participated in this awesome group interview. One thing to know about this interview, we did it in May. So things have definitely changed since then. As we all know, they seem to change every day and every week. But I think there was still some interesting takeaways to share with you all here. So there we go. Okay, so Lloyd and I bucketed these into four major categories, four major takeaways, if you will. The first one, commute teams are essential employees at universities. So the biggest immediate sense that I got when we were talking to all these universities was just how, even though their role kind of changed overnight and on the dime, they were essential to university functions, to campus safety, to parking enforcement, and immediately sort of responding in the moment, but also planning for the future. Which leads me to the second takeaway, which is university campuses are not built for social distancing. And I mean that in the dorms, I mean that in the classrooms, but we also saw it in this someone said how to turn the lights off, and now we're trying to figure out how to turn the lights back on. And in turning the lights back on, they were realizing that, none of their systems were set up for social distancing. How do they manage that on campus, in classrooms, but also in just how they get folks to work? And a number of them were planning phased hybrid models of return to campus, which included some people being online and some people being in person. And they were considering not just how people got to campus, but also how they got around campus via shared bike fleets or inter-campus rideshare rather than shuttles, and just really rethinking how kind of everything was done. Third, a lot of them were thinking about using this opportunity to switch to daily parking charges. They saw the monthly permits as the sunk cost effect and just not working with a future hybrid environment where people are only asked to come to campus sometimes. So that was good. That was the one of the pieces of hope on the call was we know in TDM, this is the better way to do it. And we're actually seeing that opportunity to make a change right now. And then last, was that their messaging was really going to rely heavily on intrinsic motivators, since they didn't feel comfortable telling someone to take a mode that that person may not feel safe taking. They were really going to focus on telecommuting and active transportation, but on the specific intrinsic motivators behind those, rather than, telling someone that they should be not driving alone at this time. And then there was a lot of just elements of choice that came up, of also of equity, in that we need to continue to provide all these options because not everyone owns a car. So all in all, it was a wonderful conversation, and I would encourage you all to read the full interview. There's some really great insights in there. And now I will pass it over to Lloyd to talk about the Kendall Square.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, literally, one funny side note, the paper shredder truck literally pulled right in front of my office about 2 minutes ago. It was going on for 5 minutes. I was like, please stop. And so it stopped. So I'm happy to talk about Kendall Square and work with my amazing colleague, Kelly, who's been awesome. And it's really great to see all the colleagues and board members and folks here today. So yeah, we pivoted into this sort of interview mode of trying to figure out, and again, as Kelly said, this was back in May, June, when we did these interviews to kind of understand sort of post-COVID, how that could affect TDM. And as Kelly mentioned, talking about the universities, we also spoke with Alana Olson Westwater. Actually, we met her through the webinar that our previous colleagues did, at least I did, to kind of hear about some of the strategies that she was doing over at Kendall Square. For those that aren't familiar, it's over in Cambridge and in the Boston area, about 65,000 employees over there. And so you can imagine as they're trying to figure out the transit, the shuttles and so forth, and she's in charge of this whole operation, how to figure all these things out. And I thought what she shared on the webinar is the reason why we interviewed her, was just some specific strategies that I'll just talk about a little bit today, and you can go more in depth on the report. But basically, scenario planning is how they started to just kind of look at and focus on safety. At the time, even here locally, there was obviously a lot of talks about how we're going to be safe on buses and so forth. But, you know, Lana and the folks over there had real strategies, concrete strategies about how to figure out how to make things safer in partnership with the MBTA, the transit operator, and also the employers. And so putting out information around safety and really trying to figure out what the plan was moving forward, given that everything was changing by the minute. So I thought they did an amazing job of just being responsive to the unknown that we all were sort of living in. Which we mentioned around flattening the peak, what that was and sort of how they catalyzed their strategy was they talked to employers around how to do non-peak time travel. And so instead of the traditional 7 to 8 to 5, they talked to employers about, hey, can you start work at 11 or start work early in the morning to kind of limit the amount of travel that was going to happen during peak time as another sort of strategy to sort of take advantage of when things come back to normal. Can we adjust to the more flow of cars and the more transit that may happen when things come back. And then finally, the adapting through the system level changes. And so I thought some of the strategies that they thought of included a dedicated bus lane. So they thought about having bus lanes so that a lot of the employers are actually from underserved communities that have to take the bus. And so how do we, again, address equity in folks that don't own cars while talking to employers and the MBTA to figure out, you know, sort of a collective effort on travel times as, you know, the post-COVID was happening. They also started thinking about private shuttles as well. Because obviously buses, people were afraid to take buses and the train that was sort of the main mode of travel to get there beforehand. So I reached out to Alana. Fortunately, I know she's busy, so she hadn't got back because we were curious to see how they were doing and how this was panning out. And I hope that we could definitely hear back from her to see where they are. And you know, funny enough, Kelly and I thought that this might not be as relevant reading it back in May and June, and actually some of the things that she did and some of the things that universities are doing is still very relevant today to trying to adjust to this sort of post-normal, COVID environment. So we felt that it was great. It's going to be some good stuff to continue to promote as we look to the future and still day by day kind of track how this is going to all play out. Thank you. And so our full report is here. There's some fun photos. I can't believe that we did this like literally a couple weeks before everything kind of shut down, or 3 weeks before. But it was a great experience. I thank you all at ACT for having us, and even my Northern California chapter for the scholarship, and everyone that was part of this. We had, as Elizabeth said, we had a great group with Jim, and I look forward to connecting with a lot of my colleagues that I still talk to today because of it. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to it if there's any questions.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And we'll post the link to the report in the chat now too.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, it does sort of seem like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? Okay, so our last group is group number 4, so not really the last group. We're going to have Jane Davaransky, the business manager for transportation operations at Facebook, and Edward Hauer, business development associate with Translock, and their third team member, Megan Gribble, transportation planner at Old Dominion University, was not able to join us today, but I know she's here in spirit, so I will let you guys take that away.
Thanks for the intro, and I'll apologize ahead of time if my dog likes to chime in. He gets very, very passionate about TDM, so if you hear him, he's just excited about this presentation. And I think Jane, are you sharing the screen as well here?
I am, yes, I am sharing the screen. Hello, everybody. It's great seeing the entire team here virtually, so I am very excited to share a presentation with you. So when we were in Orlando, our group decided to do something called Take Action in a Box. And it was, the goal was to increase micro chapter participation events. And what we thought was that we need to get more folks involved in these micro chapter programs where they could not participate in larger local chapter events. And so we wanted to empower folks to just kind of like do pop-up type events and have them receive the tools from the ACT organization, and then use those items in the box to help them plan and organize an in-person event wherever they wanted to have it, whether it is a bar or a restaurant or some other setting where folks could come in person and do the event. And again, we would design and fill the box with swag that were logoed with ACT branded designs and whatnot. But like the other teams had mentioned, we had COVID-19, and so we had a shelter in place. So beginning in March of 2020, we all know that many locations went under mandatory shelters in place, and restrictions were created and enforced by a lot of local and state governments. And so even at Facebook, all of our business trips got canceled. We couldn't go anywhere. Everybody was told to work from home. School shut down, and my two kids had to stay home and do distance learning for the rest of the school year. And then everybody went on Zoom, WebEx or Google Meetup to do all their online meetings. So that pretty much killed our entire plan to do in-person micro chapter meetups. And so towards the end of the year, we thought maybe it would open up and conferences would open up again, but that wasn't the case. Even our ACT conference stayed in the virtual environment. So, Edward, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add on to our original scope of the idea too was, I think with the micro events and the pop-up events, the idea was to also start bringing people into the conversation with TDM who aren't necessarily working at companies like myself or James or working at a transit agency, and really bringing in other stakeholders from the community and have more outreach to folks who transportation is very important to, who may not necessarily be engaged with ACT, but would bring a great diversity of voices to it. And so part of the swag and the events, we took a lot of the individual chapter logos and created individualized swag for each of those chapters, and made access to that through the Cafe Press. Jane did a great job of designing actual swag, and I think she's wearing some of it at the moment. So it looks great.
Ta-da!
And one of the big ideas about that, where it came from, was actually at our ImpACT event in Orlando. We realized, how many times are you going to a conference, especially on a larger scale, where you're sitting in an airport next to somebody who's doing the exact same thing you're doing, and you'd have no idea. So having a sticker on your laptop, having a t-shirt or something, really can start those conversations outside of the events and continue them in the community and everywhere else. You know, it's spreading that awareness around. TDM is huge. I mean, before I started working at Transloc and went to the Emerging Technology Forum in Austin, I would have never known what TDM stood for. So I think just spreading awareness was a huge part of this, and the swag really helps create that opportunity.
Right. That's a good point, Edward. When I was in line at the airport, I was in line. It was David from We Drive You, Lloyd, myself, and Megan. We were all in line right next to each other, and we were like, you know, nobody knows anybody. And all of a sudden, David and Lloyd strike up a conversation, and all I hear is bus, blah, 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 bus, blah, 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 bus. And I'm like, hey, I'm headed to Orlando to this event. Are you guys headed there? And then you hear Megan in the background. She goes, I'm going there too. And so this lady, you know, pregnant lady's jumping up and down, and we were not wearing any logoed items. We didn't even know who each other was. But then by the time we got from the airport to the hotel, we were like good old friends. Like, that started the weekend and made it awesome. So I think that having some swag or some flair on your clothes when you go to these conferences or meetup will make the experience that much more engaging, and, you know, help people feel more inclusive and engaged in the event.
Totally. And my story of it was I got in on Saturday and I ran into David, who was wearing an ACT shirt. And I think I'm probably upset Jim and Casey because they were supposed to go to Disney World that day. And I interrupted him. I heard him yelling for him while I was trying to talk to him about TDM. And they're like, today's Disney World day. We'll deal with that the next couple days. So it definitely helps to have something to on your person.
Right. So so what the reality was yeah, we couldn't do our in-person meetup, so we pivoted and turned everything virtual. The swag store definitely helps. It creates that element of pride for the event that you might be planning. We marketed our new website through Cafe Press in the newsletter, and then it is also a link. There's also a link on the chapter website, so if you want to go in and go get your items, you can today. And then I would like to encourage your chapters, to go into the website and purchase the items. And I think whatever the organization earns from the sale of these items, which is about 5%, I think ACT can put it towards something like a scholarship for the TDM CP test or some other thing that will help other new members join ACT. So I think.
Yeah, and I can go on some of this. I think as you all have probably experienced many online events at this point, and probably tried every different type of login available. I didn't even know Cisco had one until I joined the webinar. So everyone has their own meetups, but I think some of the key takeaways is to have a great, successful virtual event is to make sure you have an itinerary and share that out. And that follows being conscious of the clock. It's easy to lose track of time in an hour or 30 minutes. So having that set itinerary helps you check all the boxes and get through everything and be concise. And to follow up on that is to have the idea of having multiple organizers. I know when I do webinars, it's super helpful to have somebody on my team monitoring the chat so I can work through the content and manage the itinerary while also having someone who can do the tech support if, let's say, people aren't able to access to the link. If I'm actually leading the event, it's great to be able to focus on the event and then have people helping coordinate. So it's always helpful to have a great team, and it really makes those go better. And, having multiple people, having Jane on is super helpful for this because I know most people don't want to hear me talk, but I love hearing Jane. So it's good to have other voices as well. And we have a link here that kind of shows if you wanted to use like Eventbrite or other portals, it can show you exactly how to do your Zoom, have a way for people to sign up and send that out. So those were quick tips.
I wanted to see, I don't know if you can see my screen. Let me navigate to the, this bar here is in the way here. This is it's Eventbrite that Edward was talking about. There's some tips on there on how to set up meetings. And then also if you go onto the ACT website, our store is there. Is it showing up on your end?
Yeah, we can see it. Do you want to put that link in the chat so that everybody can?
Oh yes.
Can go to
and
it.
Then you can go in. Each chapter has a section and it has your chapter design. So Cascade chapter, for example, has its own design. And I want to shout out to Megan, who's not here, who's on maternity leave. She was the one who designed every single logo. So I had no part in the design. I have no skills whatsoever in terms of like artistic abilities. And so she did it all. And so we were able to just translate her creativity into these logoed items on Cafe Press. So please, if you have time, check it out. We appreciate the support.
Jane, I'm gonna ask you the question that I think everyone's wondering since you've bought some of these. How do they fit? How's the true to size or what?
It's pretty good to size. It's, I don't know if I can, hold on. Let me see where.
I know everyone's gonna get off this call and place an order, so I just want to make sure we're the right sizes after this.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good in terms of the sizing. The printing's all right. I have to admit, like here's the Northern California one. If you can see, the printing's not as nice as some other things that you would find in like a t-shirt store, but it's decent. And so I was happy with it. I wear mine all the time. It's super comfortable. Like this baseball style one is very, very comfortable.
Fantastic. Yeah, I hope everybody will go off and buy some stuff. Great. Okay, so I think we are you, sorry, did I interrupt you guys? Are you guys done?
Yeah, we're done. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I just jumped right in there. I know there've been some conversations in the chat, which is fantastic. And we are right up at time. So if anybody has any questions, you can email me and I can share them with everybody. Also, please feel free to follow up on Connect, my new favorite thing to promote. David, did you want to have any last few words before we jump off?
Yeah, sure. Definitely always have last words. I just realized actually that Northern California and British Columbia look very similar. So that's my lesson learned for today. But I just want to thank all of this year's ImpACT leadership participants. It was a tremendous group of individuals. They learned more important skills around, as we all have, around pivoting and being able to respond to crisis and figure out how to get things done. And also just want to thank all of you for joining. This is one of the things I love most about ACT is just the strong community that we have, and to see all of our chapter council and board members coming out to provide that peer-to-peer support to individuals that have been working on behalf of the organization is tremendous. And as well, the group of past ImpACT leadership cohorts and leadership academy cohorts that are still involved within the organization and making their way up through the ranks. It's wonderful to see. Just, you know, great value add to the organization from all of these projects. Some are, you know, have immediately turned into benefits and services for members. Others are laying the foundation for, you know, future work and continued research. And you know, it'll be up to all of us to figure out how we make these permanent. Unfortunately, we won't have a 2021 ImpACT leadership class to kind of carry them into their next stages, but we will be, you know, working to bring back the program in 2022 once everything hopefully settles down and we're able to start meeting back up in person. So those are my thoughts, and again, thank you so much to everyone who participated and the great projects.
Great.
Excellent job, everyone. Congrats.
Thank you, everybody. It's nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your week.
Bye.
Bye.